Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight for a special screening and live Q&A with the series creators, executive producers, and SCA alumni, Robert Funke and Matt Lutsky, discussing their Showtime original series on becoming a god in Central Florida. We're going to start the event tonight by screening the first episode of the series called The Stinker Thinker, which runs about 44 minutes, and then we'll come back and have a discussion with Robert and Matt. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Sorry, I know we had some momentary connection issues there, but hopefully overall that worked out well. So let's please welcome up our guests. They're the creators of the show. They're SCA alumni, Robert Funke and Matt Lutsky. If you guys can.
Hello.
And hey.
Hello.
So you guys are fairly recent grads, 2014, right?
Yes, I mean, Matt was 2014, I was 2013. Had a slight head start.
What was your process between graduating to getting the show on the air?
It was a long one. I think pretty soon after Matt graduated and a little over a year after I graduated, we'd been reading a lot of the same things, talking about a lot of the same things. We hadn't really declared ourselves writing partners, but had both read Lawrence Wright's big Scientology expose, Going Clear, and really loved it, and had been wanting to find something in a world like that to write about. And as we were researching a lot of sort of obscure religious organizations and cults, we found that a lot of therapies that were being used to get people out of religious cults were also being used to help people recover from just very long stints in multi-level marketing organizations like Amway and Herbalife and and what have you. And those are organizations that I think both Matt and I had a lot of encounters with and experience with without sort of realizing the full depth of how they can work. And the more we read, the more just kind of incredible stories we came across. I think what made the world of what ultimately became FAM so compelling was just how relatable the kind of delusion was. So, when a lot of times when you're looking for a movie or a TV show to watch about cults or cult behavior, you're looking for the most bizarre or the most kind of kooky vision of how the world works. And what the people we were reading about were kind of chasing was not like a bizarre delusion about aliens or anything like that. It was just sort of a comfortable life in American society. And so we had a lot more empathy for those characters, and I think that's why this script ended up being strong. And then from there, we just showed it to everybody we knew, and eventually people we knew showed it to people they knew, and people they knew showed it to people who said, maybe we can help make this a TV show. And then fast forward 4 years and it became a TV show.
So you do wind up having some delusions about aliens in the show.
Yeah, we get there eventually. But as two, recently graduated guys floundering in the job market, seeing somewhere where it was like the whole job market is a cult, that was very appealing to us, much more than the alien stuff that we eventually find ourselves in.
I'm curious, it's because you said it, in 1982?
Mm-hmm.
What brought you to that time specifically? Because, obviously you're going to have a certain amount of production design and costume design that's going to have to reflect that. Is it because you really love that time, or does it reflect a specific moment in the history of these like multi-level marketing scams?
Exactly. It was the heyday of when those multi-level marketing companies were embedded in everyday society in a way that everyone touched and felt, but before the internet, to where people got a little more savvy about what they were interacting with. And so it was the most primed to take people by surprise and really invade communities and work its way through it.
Yeah, the way that multi-level marketing worked then, and still works for a lot of organizations, but it was much more physical. It was much more about tangible goods that you kept in your home. It was much more, it kind of, the big box store, the kind of Costco, Walmart ization of America was happening at about the same time, but here you could find a lot of those same threads of like, you know, one-stop shopping. Everything you could possibly need exists in this one catalog, in a way that I think, you know, had things gone slightly differently, we'd be getting all of our goods through, you know, through Amway as opposed to from Walmart, at least where I grew up. The other thing about it that was nice about setting it in 92, there were a lot of, there was an aesthetic advantage, because our, you know, our sense of humor and our sense of distance from our characters, it becomes a little bit easier if you can, if it feels like there's a little bit of distance between the audience and what's happening, and having it across that gulf of time, it lets us play around a little bit more with like the kind of classic early 90s sitcom tropes that we grew up with, and look to in our television.
Well, let's talk about setting it in Central Florida, or more specifically, this is in Orlando, right?
Yep.
So that
just outside
immediately gives you a flavor of what you're going to experience, including what was genuinely one of the most wonderfully shocking moments of television I've seen in a very long time, with that alligator attack. Where did the idea to set it there come from?
We were looking at a lot of different cities. We always knew the type of feel that we wanted for it, and then eventually we honed in on a couple places that had the hyper commercialization that just it doesn't, from an outside perspective, it doesn't have any sort of innate like culture to it, even though that isn't true at all when you're actually there. But it you know, it's a McDonald's feel. It's a everything is a store in a shopping center, and that's what life consists of. And so it's almost like you're in fam just by living in your neighborhood.
Yeah, without air conditioning, Florida would be pretty much uninhabitable. And so why I think like Disney World is such an interesting place is that, you know, if it weren't Disney World, it would be nothing. It would be swamp. It would be there would not be a lot of human presence there. And I think another thing was that we look, when we're talking about the character of Crystal, we look a little bit at Dolly Parton, about her kind of expertise as a businesswoman. I grew up very close to Sevierville and Gatlinburg, where Dollywood is. And that's like, you know, that's in the Smoky Mountains. It's a very naturally beautiful place that has been completely carved out and turned into, you know, dinner theater and go-karts and laser tags and just sort of an almost entirely artificial space. But I think for me personally, writing about Florida is better than writing about East Tennessee, because my family and neighbors won't be suspicious that I'm writing about them.
But then you throw it right into the pilot.
What's that? Oh yeah, no, we name check Dolly. She's got to be in there.
Tell us a little bit about I guess getting this to Kirsten, and what sort of feedback you got from her, and then the fact that she's also a producer on the show. Is that something where she has you know, like big creative input on, or is that just how deals are structured when you have a big big star in your show.
If Kirsten wants big creative input, she has it.
Yes.
And the wonderful thing about working with Kirsten, well, when we first sent the script out with CAA, we got signed just off of the script at CAA, and they started sending it to clients, and we got a lot of interest from the director Yorgos Lanthimos, who we were both huge fans of, and he attached to direct the pilot, ultimately dropping off because we went from AMC to YouTube, and then we bounced around a lot, and he fell off in that bumpy process. But Kirsten stayed on, so that was how she got involved initially. But yeah, no, the best thing about working with Kirsten, aside from just how incredibly good she is at her job, is that she has a lot of faith in us, in the writers, and she doesn't, she's sort of sees herself as like, yeah, I'm the lead, and I'll weigh in and tell you how I feel, but I'm not writing these scripts, so I'm not gonna note them to death either. And so we always.
Yeah, Kirsten was our first choice, and she read it and wanted to be a part of it. And from then, which was, I think that was early 2016, until I didn't hear a word from Kirsten that was critical. Critical is not the right word, but like about the kind of the creative content of the show until we were filming. Like it was just a belief in what we were doing, and that we were all going to go and do it together and make something that we were all really proud of, and it couldn't have been a better experience.
Well, that's a really interesting trajectory. You talk about going from AMC, which is, it's a basic cable, very high quality, but has, restrictions, YouTube, which has very specific restrictions, to then going to a pay cable channel like Showtime, which allows you to do potentially some things that you couldn't on those other networks. I'm curious, basically what was that step by step? I mean, you don't necessarily have to reveal anything too personal, but those are very, very different formats to bring out a show like this too.
I never, other than having to put in page breaks into the AMC version, which killed me, and I was so happy when we got rid of them, or act breaks, I never really thought of the story differently place by place. Like one thing that me and Robert have always tried to do is to kind of lead creatively and try to get people there with us. And so the show that we wanted to make is ultimately pretty close to the show that we made in a way that we're really proud with. And it's felt the same in terms of in vision and voice the whole time. And it's really been more of a difference of how people were going to experience it that would have been different at those three different places. But for us making it, at least for me, my headspace with it really was the same the whole time.
Yeah, our mandate when we set out, when we were like, hey, let's write this pyramid scheme show, we were just two guys who had recently gotten fired from assistant jobs. We didn't have any sense of like, okay, who are we targeting? Is this going to be a basic or premium? How are we doing commercial breaks? Like what, we literally were writing this to be a writing sample so that we could be writer's assistants somewhere.
We were just trying to get an agent, yeah.
So our only real goal in the way that we wrote it was like, make it as compelling and entertaining as possible, and hopefully people will like it, and we'll get some opportunity off of it. And we, got very lucky that the opportunity that we got was the opportunity to make the show, and have tried to keep that same sense of, we're not trying to bend toward any conventions other than the conventions of what we like and what we're entertained by.
We're all mostly especially in the very beginning, every scene was just like, what am I writing that's going to make Robert laugh? What is Robert writing that's going to make me laugh? What's going to be the surprising thing? Which is where as you said, the surprising scene came from was, originally it was, I think, just like a normal car accident or something. And then both of us were like, well, that's boring. What if we did something else? And you just kind of push it and push it and push it until you find the thing that both of you stop at and go, all right, we're done here. Let's go on to the next one.
Yeah, at that period in the early '90s, there were a real rash of insomnia-related car accidents from MLM distributors who had been just up all night driving to find new marks, and so yeah, it was a car wreck, and then we're like, okay, what's a little funnier than a car wreck, and just kept pushing it.
What are some examples of jokes that you wrote thinking that the other person would appreciate them?
I can tell you one that we wrote that we thought would the other person would appreciate, but is the biggest fight between us still to the history of this day, which is Dr. Horse, which is a terrible joke. Obie's horse should never in a million years be called Dr. Horse, and yet it is Dr. Horse.
Were you watching? Did we ever confirm that it's in this cut?
I have no idea what's even in the cut anymore. We've been through so many versions, but I think Dr. Horse is still in there. Alex, no?
I missed that joke. If it was
okay.
It was in there.
There's a part in the script where Obie is listing all of the. I think he says something like, "I'm not in this business to impress women. I'm in this business to see the look on my wife's face when I bought her first dressage horse, Dr. Horse." Which is a good name for a horse, in my opinion, not in Matt's.
Well, I have to say one of the things that I was really impressed by in this episode was, first when you see like Alexander Skarsgard in this, and then of course you kill him off immediately, and it's like, they Ned Starked us. Like, I think that he is such a great actor to watch, and I'm curious the discussions you guys had about, this character is only going to be here for one episode, so go big. And how did you land on him?
He was in Kirsten's phone. We got to a point, we got to a point trying to cast that part where we had gone out to some big name people who we did get the classic Hollywood response of, I think there's a zero missing on this offer from someone, I won't say who.
Mm-hmm.
That was when we were, it's not just pulling somebody to a project, it was pulling them to go work at YouTube. My dog is about to jump into bed here. But
she was like, if you enjoyed Melancholia, you're gonna love
exactly, yeah.
I mean, what's actually told us from that, which was interesting, is like he's really funny and he never gets to play funny, especially in like Melancholia. But just trust me, he's really funny, and his deal closed like, I don't know, 10 days before we started shooting, and he flew straight to set, and we didn't tell him to do anything. He came preloaded. We heard that like while the deal was being worked out, which was a real process, that he was just preparing by himself because he felt good about it and he knew it was going to close, and he showed up with everything that he did. He was ready to go and left just as quickly, and we all just looked at each other and were like, that was perfect. He did it. That was exactly what we wanted.
He was a very, very charming and uplifting presence on set, in addition to delivering in his performance. We're big fans of his.
I have to say, I'm also becoming a really big fan of Mel Rodriguez.
Oh my God.
I saw him, I loved him on The Last Man on Earth, and I'm just loving him on this show. What had you written that character with him in mind?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it took us a while to admit it. We kept saying when people would ask us about it, like they would say, well, who would play Ernie? And we'd be like, well, like think of someone like Mel Rodriguez. We don't really know like who. And then eventually we were just like, why wouldn't we just get Mel? And then thank God it all worked out. He's perfect. He was the platonic ideal for the part. And I can't imagine someone else doing it.
When you look at our sort of like the way that we're trying to balance comedy and drama, I remember like trying to pull clips to sell executives on the idea of Mel, and just like starting to watch Getting On, and then just watching 4 episodes of Getting On and being like, oh, I forgot to do any of the work part of this. Because he's just wonderful. He's a very, very kind and decent guy, and he's always been very sort of earnest in the way he's approached the part. And we love him for it. His performance and his arc in season 1 is one of my favorite things about him.
Yeah, he's got a real like gift of sort of combining pathos with humor, and the scene in the pizzeria. Wow, just this is for everyone out there. This is deep into the season, so it's maybe not something to spoil, but yeah, fantastic. So, okay, so out of curiosity, because you wrote the script as a spec, how far into the future, when you actually had to start creating a season, did you see this story going? Like, do you think about it as like a multi-year thing, or do you wait and see?
Both. So our manager, Peter, very smartly, when the first, important grown-ups read our script and said, we like this, advised us to write a Bible for it. And we spent like 3 days in a house I was dog sitting for, just kind of making stuff up and sticking it on a board. And it didn't need to be exactly what it was going to be, because, you get there and you do it in the room and you figure it out. But we had a 5-season plan. We had, a pretty thought out thing. And the benefit of it was that because it took so long between when we sat down and did that and when we actually got to the writer's room for the first time, we had years of going back through that thing. And what about this idea? What about that idea? I was, at the store today and I saw this. What if we put that in the Bible? And so season 1, especially, a huge chunk of what you see on screen was there from, before we even stepped foot in the room. Like, for instance, episode 5, when you get a deeper insight into Obi's mind and life, without spoiling things for people who haven't seen it. Like, that was not to say that we didn't come up with things in the moment for it, but like a huge chunk of the idea for that was already kind of preloaded when we started, just from like, wouldn't this be a fun way to do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had a lot of like images that again, make each other laugh. That we would say, okay, well, we got to get to a scene like this, or we've got to get to, I really want to see Cody doing this. And once there were actors inhabiting those parts and the characters were coming to life, sometimes we'd be like, oh my God, that thing that we like had totally brushed over, we have to do it. Like, and we would, we tried to just always drive towards whatever was most exciting to us.
I like how there's a lot of interesting character traits across the board that make them very fun to watch. And there's something about Obi's just like the way that he lusts after the Hot Pocket. And this sort of irrational hatred of fruits and vegetables. But also like smaller characters, like the woman that has to repo, all of Crystal's belongings. Tell us about how you approach individual characters in terms of wanting to flesh them out with things that are surprising.
I'll talk about Rhonda for a quick second. The character you just mentioned, the repo lady. Basically, that was one of those that came from a studio note. They were like, well, Crystal needs somebody that she can talk to. She needs a friend. And we had always kind of pictured Crystal as very much a lone wolf character. And so just like looking at what we had outlined for episode 2, we were like, okay, who of these, like, what we thought of at the time of like one episode parts, who could keep coming back? And it was just, I think we once Divine Joy Randolph, who is just a absolutely brilliant character actor, showed up. She just like, we could never fully justify why the repo lady was just always around and being Crystal's best friend. Okay. But that was just pure us falling in love with an actor and doing whatever we could do to get her back on screen as much as possible.
Yeah, and with Rhonda, because I remember this specifically, we were trying to figure out in the room a way that a repo person showing up and taking Crystal stuff from her in front of people would be like fun and not both a boring scene that we've seen before, but also just like really miserable to watch. And I don't remember whose idea it was, but someone just got onto the idea that Rhonda was really into improv comedy and was trying to do like a scene throughout the scene. And she was like in her own little world. And that thing of people have lives outside of, the scene they're inhabiting, and they go home and they do something different than whatever they're here for in the plot, is really important to us. And we just try to find the little details that make us laugh, the little moments that remind us of someone, and just give a little more life to something that would be flat or otherwise.
I don't want to spoil the season for anyone, but can you talk about the idea of developing the relationship that Crystal has following the first couple episodes? I guess, I mean,
her romance.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of hard not to spoil stuff, but I think it's safe to say that this is a fun direction to tease people to keep watching, right?
Sure.
Yeah, we had originally, I mean, the very earliest drafts. So there's a scene in episode 4. I'll spoil it. It's mine to spoil.
Is it?
It's the she and Cody end up getting together, and the scene that takes place at the end of episode 4 we originally had at the end of the pilot. So we were just doing 4 episodes worth of stuff in about 15 pages.
It shows us how inexperienced, to our benefit, we were, and how young. So we wrote like a 80-page TV pilot that encompassed 4 episodes of what ended up being TV, and somehow got it through.
I mean, the almost like S&M relationship that develops is really so watchable. Where did that component come in?
We were curious about the idea of having their relationship. You know, the show is fundamentally about like negotiated power dynamics. Crystal is being exploited by her workplace through a series of negotiations that she simply doesn't have the leverage to come out on top in. And in her relationship with Cody, it's this one bizarre sort of, it's like if your partner were to pass away and just leave you with a cache of very rare Pokemon cards, and you find yourself at a Pokemon convention. It's the only place in the world where you would be the wealthiest person around, and that's the position Crystal's in. Is the real world doesn't value her at all, but the fan world really does, and no one is more obsessed with the fan world than Cody, and so she has power specifically with Cody, and that starts to exercise itself physically. And we were interested in doing an S&M style relationship among people who didn't really have the vocabulary for what that was. So you I think some of what's interesting to us is watching them kind of discover these things without being able to like Google it and learn all the terminology. They're sort of finding it themselves.
Yeah. And also, I mean, just character. Like Crystal is she has absolutely no power when we meet her in the imagined history of her life up to that point. And Cody has all the power in the world if he, choose to wield it the right way. And when we would think about like, how would these two people continue to, interact with each other, especially at that level, like that was not just the most obvious way of how it happened, but the only one that we could even picture is like she would have to dominate him, because in what other way would she continue to put up with this, let alone enjoy it?
So are you guys ready with the second season? It's supposed to come out this year?
We are ready to shoot whenever shooting is a possibility. Yeah. We were supposed to start shooting the first week of April, and so we have all our scripts ready to go, and they're pretty good, and we'll see.
Is there, dare I ask if you're shooting on location?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, yes, like we shot in New Orleans, really love our crew there, hope that, we will continue to shoot there. It's just we are in the same kind of pickle that everybody's in right now with COVID, and trying to figure out a safe way to resume the work of giving people their beloved TV series.
Speaking of which, especially with the TV series in between seasons, I'm curious, like, if you guys are doing anything creative to engage the fans. I mean, obviously doing Q&As, that is one forum for that, but are there any other sort of things you guys have come up with in this sort of virtual life to sort of give people a taste of what they might get next season?
No.
No, nothing.
No. The three of us should write a letter to Sony and ask them to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of our concern is just we want the episodes and the scripts to be superlative, and so any extra energy that we have, we go back into the scripts that we've written, we punch them up, we try to make every word on every page sing as much as possible. And if someone were to come to us and say, like, we're interested in doing a web series, or we want to produce Obi Garbo motivational tapes or whatever, we'd be totally game, but nobody has come to us with that. So we're just focusing on the episodes.
Right on. All right, so let's start opening this up. The way that we'll do it is, as you guys put your questions into the Q&A box, I'll call on you, and then we'll invite you over as a panelist so that you can turn on your video if you choose to. And if you'd rather not, that's fine too. Just turn on your microphone so that we can hear you. Okay, so I'm going to go to Gloria Galarza. So Gloria, again, I'm going to move you over, and you're welcome to turn on your video, but you don't have
to. I'm reading her question here in the chat box. So if she, there she is. Hi, Gloria.
Hi. Yes, I had a question. First, Alex, I don't know if you remember, we were in the Italian group conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Nice to see you again. Now, my question was, is there an intended, did you guys intend or have in mind a message? Was there an intended message throughout this pilot? I loved it, by the way. It is great. It keeps you hooked from beginning to end. And there are so many good things, to get from it. But it depends, I guess, on the point of view of the viewer, but you two intended a specific message through this pilot?
Personally, I would say rather than a message, and this is kind of both with the pilot, but also just what we do in general, we try to evoke questions or feelings, or leave something open-ended enough so that people can have their own responses and their own trails of thought with it.
I think we have our feelings about these types of organizations and these types of businesses and the way that they work. But I think what makes the pilot successful from our perspective is that once we have kind of, our pile of goofy stories, or our, these characters that we love, we try to invest in them as much as possible as people that we really care about, and trying to, when you look at a character like Travis in the pilot, we never wanted to write him in such a way that we didn't deep down want things to work out for him. And when you sort of give your characters that type of life outside of yourself, you come away caring about them and feeling a different type of sympathy and a different type of identification. And I think that, if you do your job right, that makes the whole thing resonate more and mean more, but not in a prescriptive way. We were able to tell the story we wanted to tell, and then the themes kind of bubble up from that.
Yeah, our esteemed professor from USC, Ted Braun, who I believe is watching right now, made an excellent documentary about a similar subject matter called Betting on Zero. And there is whether he intends one or not, there is a real message from that documentary as well. There should be. And because of the form of the TV show versus a documentary, we're just trying to first and foremost lead with stories about characters and kind of put you into their world and their shoes and go from there.
Well, congratulations. I wish you success because it's really good. I really liked it. The acting, the casting was so good and everything. In what channel, or is it gonna be on cable or HBO?
It's on Showtime. If you're
Showtime.
in Italy.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Before we go to the next person, actually, it's funny that you brought up Ted, because I was thinking about Herbalife when I was watching the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when we did a screening of his movie on campus, we got like people pretending, to...
They squirreled you.
Yeah, you got squirreled.
Yeah,
this is the Scientology stuff, with all due respect.
Yes, exactly. Did you have any of that happen? I mean, like, just, people basically coming in to well, I mean, how would you define it? Like posing as people to do research on the kind of the way that you're disparaging this kind of this world?
Yeah, goons. No, we actually didn't, and we were surprised by that. I mean, I guess it could still happen, and we'll see. But
it might be happening right now on the other side.
That's true. I haven't checked these Q&A questions. They might be coming in. But I think because of the remove of it, like Betting on Zero is about Herbalife. And so Herbalife has a vested interest in defending themselves or deflecting against it. Whereas, we're about fam and we're about people in a, fictional place in Florida in a way that we hadn't really anticipated. But I think no one wants to point to fam and say, well, that's us and you're lying about us. Everyone, it gives them that little bit of a shield to say, well, we don't do that. That's not, who we are. Even though we all see it, I hope, and recognize the types of companies or people or products that, are in these things.
A memo did go around pretty early on from their kind of inside the industry newsletter, basically.
Oh yeah, this was good.
There is a show coming out. It is definitely about us. Everybody be cool. Don't freak out on these guys. Just maybe the show will suck and get canceled, and then we can all be fine. And thus far, no dice for them. But I think when they kind of came after Ted's film in that way, that probably ended up blowing up in their faces, because I think that was a big part of the story of that film, and a big part of the rollout is the way that it was attacked in that way.
Big Streisand effect.
Yeah.
Did Showtime ever brand any fam merchandise for the show?
Not commercially available, but there was a bunch of stuff that they surprised us with at the premiere party that I stole, and I imagine many other people did too. And so I have all sorts of like coasters and toilet paper and stuff with fam logos on it, which is very cool, and I cherish it.
I think they handed out essential oil diffusers at the TCAs.
All right, let's go to our next question. We'll go over to Rebecca Chu, who is an incoming producing student.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, so my question is whether you can spend a bit of time talking about the process of how you assembled your writer's room. And I'm curious if there were any elements specific to the show that made putting together this writer's room uniquely different from, any other writer's room.
Sure. We were looking, obviously, when we were putting together our room. The show, first of all, the show is, the protagonist is a woman. Matt and I are not. And so when we were finding our showrunner, Esta Spalding, it was really important to have a woman's voice at the top with us. We love Esta very much. Then sort of as we were staffing, we would ask pretty much everybody, have you ever been involved in a multi-level marketing schemes? And, what was your background like? We were interested in, diversity, in the sort of, not just kind of like gender diversity and racial diversity, but also socioeconomic. We wanted, people who had to try to make a living in a fairly brutal economy, which is actually, not easy to find because of the way that, this industry and so many are structured. It's people who have had to actually, fight their way to get where they are often passed up in favor of people who've been able to sustain themselves with, during unpaid internships and what have you.
Yeah,
so,
we were looking for great writers first and foremost, and then people who had, ideas and experiences that not both aligned with the show and what the stories that we knew we wanted to tell, but also that we would have never thought of. Like, so much of what you see in season 1 throughout is the result of, a pitch that our writer Carlos came in that it just knocked our socks off, and it was just wholesale. Like, okay, that's that now. That's the pizzeria scene, where people came to us, with their experiences, their stories, and we wanted to find the ones that were exciting to us, that got us talking. Like, we knew a meeting was good when the person left, and we were still talking about the things that we were talking about in the meeting, where it wasn't just like, tell us about how you grew up or whatever. Like, we were talking about, religion or whatever 20 minutes later because of Carlos. Like, that's how we knew, like, oh, we're hiring that person for sure.
Yeah, Carlos is such a good example. Carlos Rios has been with us for 2 seasons now. And yeah, in his initial interview, we read his script, we loved it, we knew he was a great writer. And when he came in, he's a very kind of soft-spoken guy and sort of hung back. And I think like maybe 10 minutes into the interview, he was like, I think my mom was in one of these for like most of my childhood. And we're like, oh, go on, like speak on that. And he was like, well, I just kind of remember he kind of went into his experience of having been the child of somebody who was pretty deep into a makeup-based multi-level marketing scheme as just like a 7-year-old. His big memory was that her upline just had like horrible gas, and so his memory is like smelling farts in a small room full of boxes as a 7-year-old. And we were like, yeah, that's about okay, come on in. Like,
yeah, that's the scene.
Right.
That's a character, that's a description, that's a moment in the show.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, that kind of touches on this next question from Jesse Lerhoff, but Jesse, let me move you over in case you want to expand on that.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Jesse.
I just want to say that the show's awesome. I watched the entire season and loved it.
Thank you.
So my question was, have you guys ever been involved with one of these? I mean, I didn't have much knowledge of it, so watching this play out was really interesting, and I kept thinking, like, where did they get this idea, or did they know anyone that was involved, or had they ever been caught up in one of these schemes? And I have a secondary question. Does Kirsten Dunst use, like, an accent in this, or is that how she speaks? Because I know she has this accent in a few other things.
Second question first. She is putting on an accent in this, but also Kirsten, like the first time we met her when she was walking up from a distance, I was looking at her and it was just like, holy shit, that's Crystal. Like, I guess the point is we did a good job with casting.
Yeah, so Matt and I both, so for example, when I was in high school, one of my football coaches was recruiting football players, high school football players, people who depended on him for playing time into his Advocare tree. And a lot of my friends were involved in Cutco knife sales and a lot of these multi-level marketing programs where my main experience of them was like, it's sales, but the way that you sell is you go to your friend's parents and you say like, look, I'm really just trying to learn how to work a job, and you kind of play on their emotions And eventually, you know, they will buy a bunch of stuff that they don't actually need that you can then go and show. And it was like it was definitely a type of business where I was like, door-to-door sales feels very antiquated. And yet you would hear about like very specific products, vacuum cleaners, makeup, what have you. Also, one time Matt and I were in Las Vegas just for fun.
This was probably 6 months before we wrote the script.
Yeah.
It did not at all lead to the idea for the script in a way that's interesting.
No, it's one of those things where like once you sort of spend a little bit of time in this world, you step out and you realize like, oh, that's what that was. That's what that person was talking about. But it was people taking pictures of each other with these banners that said, "You should be here." And the point was to post those pictures on Facebook or Instagram or social media and make others very jealous of you. And then they would say, "How did you do that?" And you would say, "Well, I have this business that's afforded me the ability to go all these places that you want to go." And it's very confusing. Whenever you would start to ask questions, it would kind of fall apart, and it had this like Alice in Wonderland quality that we like to play with. But yeah, we would run into these things all the time.
Well, but also that same weekend, we somehow got embroiled with a CrossFit MLM where they kept buying us drinks and getting us into like clubs that we would have never paid to go into, but they paid for it. And we didn't know what was happening. We just knew that they had like befriended a friend of ours, and we thought it was just like, oh, we're all hanging out. And then it became clear that like they all paid enormous amounts of money to be there for leads, and that we were the beneficiaries of it. It was like fun until it was sad, which was the absolute perfect mix for what would become the show.
Thanks so much. Super interesting. Can't wait for season 2.
Thank you so much. One more thing on that question I would say, though, is that the other thing about looking for how these organizations are reflected in our lives is that, for example, when you classify your employees as contractors rather than employees, you don't have to pay them benefits, you don't have to pay them, you don't have to sort of abide by any kind of regulations labor-wise, which is how the entire gig economy works now. So all of the more exploitative aspects of like Uber or Lyft or Airbnb, a lot of them have their kind of legal and contractual roots in the stuff that we're writing about in our show.
Yeah, we try not to think of it as this like weird organization we were looking at, but kind of the life that we all live within, and just like moved one step to the left.
Has anyone, I have a follow-up question. Has anyone seen the show and said to you, geez, I'm part of one of these things and I didn't realize it until I watched the show?
We had someone posted on the show's Reddit that after watching episode 5, which for us is like a real stylistic shift. That's when we sort of move a lot more into a surreal place. For us, we were worried that things were coming ungrounded in that episode. And someone just saying, you know, I was in a cult for 7 years. You know, my partner was in there for 11. They just got out. This episode helped me process that. There were a lot of people that I think saw things that resonated with them that even took us by surprise.
Mm-hmm. Is that the one where they're cleaning up the leftover trash on the floor?
Yeah, yeah, there were definitely a lot of things in that episode where we were like, oh, this is too silly. We're like kind of, you know, we're jumping the shark or whatever. And then that was the one that people who had been in these organizations.
Oh, that's the Hot Pocket episode.
That is the Hot Pocket episode, yeah.
How can I forget?
Yeah, the great Ted Levine.
Yes.
Truly a master.
Sorry, I didn't mean to hijack that question. Okay, so let's go over to Nina Lesher. Hi, Nina. You just have to, yeah, there you go. Unmute yourself.
Hi, guys. Thanks for doing this. I just wanted to talk about your experience with producers from Showtime. And we had a discussion last week with Judd Apatow, who talked about how you kind of have to consider their needs and their job as part of, you know, maintaining your show. And I don't know if you guys feel that way or have that kind of experience. And if you could talk about like how you collaborate with them.
Well, season one, we were so, everything was very tumultuous. So we were producing the show with YouTube originals, and they were in the process of kind of building a Netflix competitor paywalled premium television outlet. And while we were filming the 6th episode, it came out in the trades that organization was essentially collapsing, and that they would probably not do that. And so we found ourselves in a position where like we kept getting, we were a little bit like the proverbial kids shuffled from home to home, and we didn't have any set of parents consistently enough to where we had to address their needs or anticipate their needs. And so the chaos of what it took to actually program our show on a network ultimately, I think, worked out to our creative benefit, in that we kind of were, at a certain point we were like, they would give us a note and we'd be like, but that's not really what we want to do. And they'd be like, yeah, and we're probably not going to be able to put this on the air anyway, so I guess just go do what you want.
Yeah, I kept waiting for, like the point where the actor, gives you a bunch of notes at the last minute and you have to rewrite everything, those types of stories that you hear. And we never got them, in a way that I feel incredibly fortunate for, that, the actors showed up and did a remarkable job of acting the scenes that we gave. They had thoughts and we would, address things, but that's kind of what it was. With the studio and the network, I think both because we got shuffled around so much, and also because tonally and content wise there's not a lot of comps for our show. I think everybody kind of had like well, let's just see what happens mentality, in a way that really benefited us, because we got to just make the thing that we wanted to make the best that we knew how. And there wasn't a whole lot of, well, it needs to be like this because of on this other show we got this, whatever. It didn't really exist for Unbecoming a God. And so what you see on screen, more or less, other than like production difficulties, is exactly what we wanted to do.
Yeah, our we took all of our collaborators in good faith, and by and large worked, at YouTube, at and then now at YouTube, at Sony, and now at Showtime. As we were writing the 2nd season, everyone has kind of been good. The notes that they've had tend to get us closer to the thing that we want to make, and not try and make it into something else.
It didn't seem like they were breathing down your necks or anything like that, huh?
We were fortunate. Yeah, we've been really lucky in that regard. It helps if people often just don't get it.
No one wants to admit they don't get something. So a lot of the times, if you have a real big Hot Pocket scene, everyone has to just shrug their shoulders and say, we'll see.
That's great. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm going to just sort of read this one. But, you guys have talked a little bit about the writer's room already, but I guess if you could tell us a little bit about how you prepare for doing that for the first time in your careers.
We were incredibly lucky to be paired with Esta Spalding, who is our showrunner and partner on the show. And so Esta, she is a unbelievably seasoned TV vet, both from Canadian TV and then American TV. And so she came in, and in a way that was incredibly kind and empathetic to what Robert and I were going through at the time and trying to figure it all out, kind of told us like, here's what we're doing in terms of like how you actually make a show, and here is how I'm going to step back and help you find creatively the things that you want to do and help you get to those places. But the nuts and bolts of it, Esta was such an unbelievable teacher, and just like, we're showing up at this time, we're going to talk about these goofy ideas. Until then, we got to have this document for the studio by this date, so that means we need to do this. Like, she was on top of it in a way that was a crash course in show running.
We were very afraid when Sony picked up the show. We knew that they were going to stick us with a showrunner, because, you know, I had been a writer's assistant for one season of one show. Matt had not worked on a TV show. They were not going to let us run the room because for the same reason you don't let a toddler drive a car. And so we were really afraid, right, that someone would come in and say, you know, this is my show now, or that they would say, you know, you idiots don't know what you're doing, or try to dominate us in some way. And Esta, from the very beginning, has looked to facilitate what we're trying to do. She's become, she's a brilliant writer, and her voice has become just as much part of the show as ours. And we got real lucky with that one.
Okay, we've got a couple things that just came in. The first one is probably quick. How did you come to name the show?
You got it?
Sure, yeah. So we took a walk, and I think Matt said, if we could name it anything, what would we name it? And I blurted out what the title is. But then when we partnered with Smokehouse, they were like, can we get a shorter title? And we were like, I don't think so. And then Sony was like, okay, but can you really do a shorter title? And we were like, maybe we'll think about it. And then AMC was like, all right, can we get a shorter title? And we were like, sure. And then AMC was like, we're actually not going to make the show. And we're like, okay, so we'll keep the title then. And then YouTube was like, we love it, but can you make a shorter title? And we were like, yeah, we'll think about it. And then YouTube collapsed, so we got to keep our title. So basically, we just outwaited, we waited out several different producers who wanted us to change it until it finally became the title of the show, at which point we both got very self-conscious that it was too long.
I didn't.
Has there been, I mean, are there any real consequences of how long it is?
No. Well, I mean, maybe. I don't know. In a way that no one on this call would understand. I'm sure there's like a marketing person in an office at a studio somewhere who could explain this. But as far as we are all concerned, that's the best title for the show.
I like it.
Thanks, me too. I do feel stupid when I say it out loud to people.
Well, I think we had a friend who talked about the way that our music supervisor was talking about, like, he's started to get a thrill when people ask the name of the show because he knows he has to take a big breath and then just give this like extremely long and clunky thing. And he was like, most shows you don't have to do that with. It makes it stand out.
All right, we've got one last question. We'll take it. It's Diane Tucker, and I'll move Diane over. Are you with us, Diane? Oh. Hello? Maybe not.
I can read the question.
Sure. Oh, yes. Absolutely.
The question is, there's a way in which the derivatives of the multi-level marketing company are on a national stage now. Given that Betsy DeVos has such influence on US education and her money all derives from that kind of business. Betsy DeVos married into the DeVos family who Rich DeVos started Amway or made Amway into what it is. I wonder, does that fact make a story like hers or a figure like her something you'd like to include, or is she as a figure or a story like hers too political or fraught for you? It's a great question. I think like one of the more exciting things about having made, you know, we wrote this in 2014, and you know, a central feature of the pilot script is that there is a kind of bombastic, bloviating millionaire who just yammers nonsense about how rich and successful he is all the time, and people seem to gravitate toward him for reasons that are hard to understand. That ultimately became really reflected in our national moment in the presidential election of that time. That he went on to name actual pyramid scheme scions like Betsy DeVos into his cabinet. You know, that's always been not just you know, not just on the American right, but you know, Bill Clinton spoke at Amway conferences. Basically, every president since, I mean, you know, Kamala Harris had the opportunity to prosecute Herbalife and didn't. There are politicians on both sides of the American spectrum that have dabbled in this world and come away with their hands dirty a little bit. I think we want to avoid being so didactic about things, and I think the characters that we are most fascinated by are the ones whose struggles most resemble ours, whether it's, you know, Crystal trying to keep her kid fed, or Obi just dealing with this kind of roaring insecurity. We do find our way into some of the upper echelons of the FAM corporate office eventually, but it's just not where we've been most interested thus far.
Yeah, multi-level marketing is so baked into the everyday life and extreme elite life of American society that there's no way to avoid it. But also we wouldn't want to. But like Robert said, I don't think we have any real interest in like a real didactic thing you see sometimes of like, oh, that's the person who represents this person we all know. Kind of where we started this conversation was talking about, you know, character traits that we could latch onto that give us an insight into something we know and recognize and makes us laugh or makes us sad or something like that. And those are always going to be the people that we gravitate to. And so someone like a Betsy DeVos, or, you know, anyone that we could talk about who's, you know, a person at large, it's going to be a human trait that makes us feel something inside from one way or another, that if they, you know, find themselves as an analog in the show, that's what we're writing about, instead of, you know, the political mechanisms.
Speaking of Obi, is that Ted's real hair? Or did you slap a wig on him?
Everybody in the show is a wig. There's so many wigs in the show.
Yeah, there was this idea that below the stage where we were shooting, there was just like a you know, 1,400-pound beast that just kept demanding more bad wigs. Because eventually, as you get into like episode, there's just down the line, there's actors, the character doesn't need a wig. There's, you know, it could be a bald kid, and we just keep throwing wigs on him.
We love a good wig. We also have an incredibly bald cast. If you look, we put the pictures of all our cast up on our walls in our writer's room. If you look at the men, nearly 100% are bald, except for Theo, because he's like 20. And I take great pride in how bald our cast is.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing all of that with us tonight. And I really hope you guys can get back to work. I mean, well, supposing you're working very hard on the scripts, but get back to shooting when it's safe and ready to go.
Thank you. And I hope everyone's doing well out there. And thanks for watching.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everyone.